Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Kunja Vihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari
Gopi Giridhari
Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanachari
Gopi
Yashodanandana
Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Midham Tham Sajivam Sadvaitam Savaduta Paridam Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Midham Stam Sri Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandhu Jagapati Gopish Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gauranga Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakapachubhischa Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Technical difficulties?
Yes.
Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Dharam Shaiva Narottamam Devim
Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nastapareshu Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Bhaktir
Bhavati
Nastaki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Nastaki.
Today, 13th of August 2020, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, the status quo. Chapter 25, The Glories of Devotional Service. Text number 36. Darshaniya Vaya Vaya Tudara
Tardarshaniya Vayanara
Vilasanakshi Pravam Mushukai
Vilasahasi Chitamanasukai
Dhatmano Hrita Pranamsta Bhakti
Tatmano Rita Pranamsa Bhakti
Nashtadomi Gataman Prayute
Anityatame
Darshaniya Vaya Vaya Ludara
Darshaniya Vayanara
Vilasa Asik Shitavam Masuktai
Vilasahasi Chitamanasukai
Tatmano Hrita Pranamscha Bhakti
Vitatmanarita Pranamsa Bhakti
Anishtatome Gatamandim Prayukte
Anishatome Gatimanvin Prayukte
Darshaniya Vaya Vaya Ludara
Tadarshaniya Vayanara
Vilasa Asik Shitavam Masuktai
Vilasahasi Chitamanasukai
Tatmano Hrita Pranamscha Bhakti
Vitatmanarita Pranamsa Bhakti
Anishtatome Gatamandim Prayukte
Anichatome Gatimanvin Prayukte
Darshaniya Vaya Vaya Rudara
Darshaniya Vaya Vaya Ludara
Vilasahasi Shitavama Suktai
Vilasahasi Chitamanasukai
Vitatmano Hrita Pranamscha Bhakti
Tatmano Hrita Pranamscha Bhakti
Anichatome Gatimanvin Prayukte
Mandim Prayukte
Darshaniya Vayarvir Udara
Darshaniya Vayavayudara
Vilasaha Sikshitavama Sutai
Vilasa Shishitavama Sutai
Ritatmano Hrita Pranamsha Bhaktir
Vitatmano Hrita Pranamscha Bhaktir
Anichato Me Gatim Anvim Prayunkte
Anishchitomi Gatimandim Prayukte Tartarshaniya Vayavayudara Vilasaha Sikshitavama Sutai Vitatmano Hrita Pranamscha Bhaktir
Anichato Me Gatim Anvim Prayunkte.
Did you sing in choir? When you were kids? Just all natural. You pick up on things better. Anyone else? Darshaniya Vayavayudara Vilasaha Sikshitavama Sutai Ritatmano Hrita Pranamscha Bhaktir Anichchitomi Gatimanvim Prayukte Darshaniya Vayavayudara Vilasaha Sikshitavama Sutai Ritatmano Hrita Pranamscha Bhaktir Anichato Me Gatimanvim Prayukte Darshaniya Vayavayudara Vilasaha Sikshitavama Sutai Ritatmano Hrita Pranamscha Bhaktir Anichato Me Gatimanvim Prayukte Tai by those forms Darshaniya charming Avayavai whose limbs Udara exalted Vilasa pastimes Hasa smiling Ikshita glances Vama pleasing Suktai whose delightful words Rita captivated Atmanaha their minds Rita captivated Pranan their senses Cha and Bhakti devotional service Anichchataha unwilling my Gatim abode Anvim subtle Prayukte secures translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Upon seeing the charming forms of the Lord, smiling and attractive, and hearing His very pleasing words, the pure devotee almost loses all other consciousness. He doesn't lose consciousness. He loses all other consciousness except Krishna consciousness. His senses are freed from all other engagements, and he becomes absorbed in devotional service. Thus, in spite of his unwillingness, he attains liberation without separate endeavor. Please repeat. Upon seeing the charming forms of the Lord,
Upon seeing the charming forms of the Lord,
smiling and attractive,
smiling and attractive,
and hearing his very pleasing words,
and hearing his very pleasing words,
the pure devotee almost loses all other consciousness.
the pure devotee almost loses all other consciousness.
His senses are freed from all other engagements,
His senses are freed from all other engagements,
and he becomes absorbed in devotional service.
and he becomes absorbed in devotional service.
Thus, in spite of his unwillingness,
Thus, in spite of his unwillingness,
he attains liberation without separate endeavor.
he attains liberation without separate endeavor.
Purport. This is a very extensive purport. Please bear with us. But fortunately, not only is it extensive, but it's completely ecstatic. There are three divisions of devotees: first class, second class, and third class. Who knows the Sanskrit terms for those? The first class is Uttama Adhikari. Sama means darkness, Uttama means beyond the darkness, above the darkness. So Uttama means first class. We say Uttama Shloka. The Lord is praised with transcendental poetry. Second class is called Majjhima. Majjhima Adhikari. Majjhima means middle. Sometimes in Sanskrit a beautiful woman is referred to as Majjhima because she has this slim waist. She's slim in the middle, the Majjhima. And then the third class is called Kanishta. Kanishta Adhikari. And Prabhupada goes on to say, even the third class devotees are liberated souls. It is explained in this verse that although they do not have knowledge, simply by seeing the beautiful decoration of the deity in the temple, the devotees become absorbed in thought of him and lose all other consciousness. Simply by fixing oneself in Krishna consciousness, engaging the senses in the service of the Lord, one is imperceptibly liberated. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Simply that by discharging uncontaminated devotional service as prescribed in the scriptures, one becomes equal to Brahman. In Bhagavad Gita it is said, Brahma Bhuyaya Kolte. This means that the living entity in his original state is Brahman, because he is part and parcel of the Supreme Brahman. But simply because of his forgetfulness of his real nature as an eternal servitor of the Lord, he is overwhelmed and captured by Maya. His forgetfulness of his real constitutional position is Maya. Otherwise, he is eternally Brahman. When one is trained to become conscious of his position, he understands that he is the servitor of the Lord. Quote, Brahman refers to a state of self-realization. Even the third-class devotee, who is not advanced in knowledge of the absolute truth, but simply offers obeisances with great devotion, thinks of the Lord, sees the Lord in the temple, and brings forth flowers and fruits to offer to the deity, becomes imperceptibly liberated. I love the way Prabhupada says, brings forth flowers and fruits to offer. Becomes imperceptibly liberated. Shradayam Vitaha. With great devotion, the devotees offer worshipful respects and paraphernalia to the deity. The deities of Radha and Krishna, Lakshmi and Narayana, and Rama and Sita are very attractive to devotees. So much so that when they see the statue decorated in the temple of the Lord, they become fully absorbed in thought of the Lord. That is the state of liberation. In other words, it is confirmed herewith that even a third-class devotee is in the transcendental position above those who are trying for liberation by speculation or by other methods. Even great, like we heard about one devotee thought of some other method, being in the moment, impersonalists like Shukadeva Goswami and the four Kumars were attracted by the beauty of the deities in the temple, by the decorations, and by the aroma of tulsi offered to the Lord, and they became devotees. Even though they were in the liberated state, instead of remaining impersonalists, they were attracted by the beauty of the Lord and became devotees. Here the word vilas is very important. Vilas refers to the activities or pastimes of the Lord. It is a prescribed duty in temple worship that not only should one visit the temple to see the deity nicely decorated, but at the same time, he should hear the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, or some similar literature, which is regularly recited in the temple. It is the system in Vrindavana that in every temple there is recitation of the Shastras. Even third-class devotees who have no literary knowledge or no time to read Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita get the opportunity to hear about the pastimes of the Lord. In this way, their minds may remain always absorbed in the thought of the Lord, His form, His activities, and His transcendental nature. This state of Krishna consciousness is a liberated state. Lord Chaitanya therefore recommended 5 important processes in the discharge of devotional service. 1. To chant the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. 2. To associate with devotees and serve them as far as possible. 3. To hear Srimad Bhagavatam. 4. To see the decorated temple and the deity. And if possible, 5. To live in a place like Vrindavana or Mathura, or a temple of the Lord. Because the temple of the Lord is Vaikuntha, it's none different than the holy places. Or like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he turned his house into Goloka by performing the activities of devotional service. He said, my very house becomes transformed into Goloka, the spiritual world. So these 5 items alone can help a devotee achieve the highest perfectional stage. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita and here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. That third-class devotees can also imperceptibly achieve liberation is accepted in all Vedic literatures. Now that is good. Tarshaniya Vayavaya Udara Vilasaha Sekshitavam Suttai Vritatmano Vritta Pranam Shabhakti Anichtatomi Vritam Anvim Prite. Upon seeing the charming forms of the Lord, smiling and attractive, and hearing His very pleasing words, the pure devotee almost loses all other consciousness. The senses are freed from all other engagements, and he becomes absorbed in devotional service. Thus, in spite of his unwillingness, he attains liberation without separate endeavor. Mukham karoti vachalam bhangam girim jatvipa tamaham vande Sri Guru Dhirodatta. Whenever I hear this phrase, absorbed in devotional service, I remember my friend Dhirodatta, a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, who's no longer with us. And he used to say, with so much feeling and conviction and absorption itself, he says, you have to become absorbed. And he was a great Bhakti Guru, and a very good preacher, and a very wonderful devotee with a sublime character. From central Georgia, from Aiken, Georgia, Dhirodatta. And he also used to say that you have to sport in the waves of the Sankirtan movement, diving and surfacing in the waves. This is a phrase from Srila Prabhupada. Sporting in the waves. So since we don't have too many waves here in southern Arizona, we have to sport in the waves. Tracy's pool? No. Yes, that's all right. But also sport in the waves of Krishna consciousness, diving and surfacing, splashing about, and becoming cool and refreshed by the nectar of those waves, the waves of Krishna consciousness. And let those waves of Krishna bhakti wash over us. And that washing over us, it cleanses our hearts of all the dust accumulated for years, for births, for millions, billions of lifetimes. We have so much gunk stuck in our heart that needs to be cleaned out. And that is done through hearing, chanting, becoming absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So this is a very wonderful verse spoken by Lord Kapila, that the devotee, his senses are freed from all other engagements. Sometimes our senses, they are requiring us to do other things than Krishna consciousness. And the chief of all the senses is the mind. And the mind is requiring us so many things to do that are not Krishna conscious. So the process of bhakti trains the mind to engage in Krishna service. So when the mind is thus trained, according to Bhagavad Gita, then the mind becomes one's best friend. But the mind which is not trained up to serve Krishna and is always going here and there, thinking of sense gratification, then that mind will become one's greatest enemy. There's a somewhat humorous and sobering description we've been reading from volume 2 of the Radha Damodar Vilas about Vishnu Jan Swami. He was a sannyasi, and he was telling how Radha Damodar always saving him from sense gratification. And he's saying he's sleeping and he's dreaming. He says, in the dream, I'm going for sex. And then Radha Damodar calling me, you have to come and wake up, come and do the arti. So he wakes up and forgets all about any other engagement. And he was very absorbed in serving Radha Damodar. And everyone was charmed and inspired by his devotion for Radha Damodar, who were his personal deities for a long time. And he was traveling with them on his bus, going everywhere doing Harinam. And he was a very charismatic personality, and all the devotees were very attracted by his absorption and exhibition of Krishna consciousness. And he also happened to be a musical wizard. Just by simply playing the harmonium, devotees and non-devotees will become attracted and enchanted. What to speak of when they heard him sing, then they completely lose it. There was a description of one temple they visited, where was it, Detroit, I believe, they went to Detroit, and the devotees had been going on some busy street doing a Harinam, 2, 3 devotees, little party. No one paid any attention to them. And they were going out regularly, and, they had a bit of a lame kirtan. And then Vishnu Jan came with his bus party, and his brahmacharis, who were also, his associates were also very much absorbed and into his kirtan. And they were an important part of that too. He was very enthusiastic. And so then he came and he took the temple devotees and they went out on Harinam. And when he started chanting, suddenly everything on the street stopped and hundreds of people gathered around. What is this? Vishnu Jan Swami is chanting and absorbed. Srila Prabhupada himself certified Vishnu Jan Swami when he said in Los Angeles Vishnujan Maharaj was in the temple room, chanting, playing the harmonium. Prabhupada was in his room upstairs, not far away, and he was hearing him. And Prabhupada said, by hearing Vishnujan's chanting, I felt like I was walking in Vaikuntha. Walking in Vaikuntha. That's what Srila Prabhupada said. He's no longer walking in Los Angeles, and no longer in the material world. He's just simply experiencing the Vaikuntha atmosphere because of his wonderful chanting and expert harmonium playing. So this is the absorption of the devotee in Krishna consciousness. And so much so, here in the verse it says, the pure devotee almost loses all other consciousness. That means he's transported, like Prabhupada is saying, walking in Vaikuntha. He's no longer experiencing the material atmosphere, but he's becoming absorbed in the spiritual atmosphere. As Narottam Das Thakur says, Golokyara Prema Dham Harinam Sankirtan. This chanting of Hare Krishna, this Krishna Kirtan, is so wonderful. Why? Because Golokyara Prema Dham. It is imported from Goloka, the wealth, Premadhan, the wealth, the gift of this love of Krishna that is experienced through the chanting of Hare Krishna. It's not something of this material world at all. It's from somewhere else. It's from Goloka. Golokera Premadhan Harinam Sankirtan. Isn't that wonderful phrase? Imported. Like sometimes people want something imported, like, a fine wine from France or some Turkish tobacco or something they think that is, olives from Spain or something like that. And in the ancient world, it was spices and riches from India. India was producing spices, especially pepper, ginger, turmeric. These things were considered to be very valuable, so much so that people were willing to risk their lives to transport them, go get them from India and bring them back to Europe. Sometimes even at the cost of their lives or their health, because you didn't just jump on a plane or get in a car, you had to walk. You walk in a caravan with camels or some animals pulling a cart. It was very difficult, but it was worth it for two reasons: because the items themselves were so wonderful, and because the profits made were so tantalizing. One could become rich, a rich spice merchant. So, this chanting is the best thing there is that is imported. Better than anything from Loy Bazaar, or Jaipur, or Pushkar, or all those places that you're not going this year. The most valuable thing is this Harinam Sankirtan. So Krishna consciousness means to become absorbed in hearing, chanting, remembering, serving. And Prabhupada explains at the end of the purport the 5 processes that we hear from Rupa Goswami, the 5 most important items in devotional service. Number 1, to chant the holy names of the Lord, the Hare Krishna mantra. Number 2, to associate with devotees and serve them as far as possible. So both things, to associate and serve. To associate means to serve. This is concomitant factors of association with devotees. Means to serve them or engage side by side in service with them. This is Krishna consciousness, to engage in devotional service. So we do that collectively, communally, or in little groups, 1, 2, 3, serve Krishna as far as possible. To hear Srimad Bhagavatam. So this Srimad Bhagavatam is not some insignificant thing, just some book to be put up on a shelf. Maybe put a little light shining on it, dust it off every once in a while. No, it's meant to be, this is Bhagavat Seva, to hear, chant, learn, understand, explain, and to dive into the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's like diving into the waves, diving and sporting in the waves of Srimad Bhagavatam. And we do that, then all of our miseries just go far away. So many miseries, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, life is temporary and full of misery, so why don't you serve Krishna? What's the alternative? If you don't serve Krishna, then you experience the full temporality of material life, which is very frustrating, by the way. You have to get old, die. This is frustrating. Spiritual. I think it was Alice Cooper when I was a teenager. I'm 18 and I like it. So, I think I was about 15 when that was it. They used to play it on the radio or whatever, you hear it everywhere. So, we want to be 18 eternally, like Krishna is Navayovanam. He's eternally youthful. We were talking about that the other day. He's beauty. Of course, they say youth is when we get old, we'll be complaining, well, when I was young, when I was a brahmachari, we were austere. Not like these newfangled devotees, sacrifice anything. We used to joke like that. But look now. We were right. We knew what was coming. So no. So can you name the devotees who are on the decorating crew, please?
There was Don Keeley, there was Chaitanya Leela, there was Michelle, there's Anna, and myself.
Thank you very much. All glories to the decorating ladies who give us all a chance to increase our appreciation. The same way, but you may notice that the way this altar is constructed, the tiles are not symmetrical.
Must be going crazy.
Huh?
You must be going crazy.
Oh, it drives me crazy. The tiles on the left side are different than the tiles on the right side. Like they ran out of it. Just available. It is also any temple of Krishna, where the deity is being worshipped, where the holy name is being chanted, and all the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam, then it is not from Vaikuntha. Just like the of a foreign, when you're in a foreign country and there's an embassy from your they want to be posted in some country, some European country, Rome or Paris or London, where everything is very Western. So anyway, Tony jumped at the chance because he was a devotee, so well, I got a little taste of India this way. And he became our Delhi. But the American embassy in Delhi, they air conditioned. You go in, air conditioning. India can in the streets of Delhi. Our cow horns. So, Delhi, a very crowded, old school Asian city. But Dr. Tony was guarding in the air conditioning with the Coke machine. So it is just like America. But 30 years ago, we were in 1977, he was deputed to get Srila Prabhupada's green card had expired, it was not renewed properly, and he had no way to get into America, he had to get a visa. And then the consulate general Vrindavan, and he's not feeling well. And then the answer is no. And this is the consulate general, this is was an American lady. She's the bosses of all the other consulates throughout India. So they also have one consulate in Calcutta, a small one. And at that time, the consul in the small American embassy in Calcutta had an air conditioner, a window. Makes all and explained the situation. But he said, "Look, that woman is my boss, so I cannot give the visa." But previously, Abhiram had been talking with him in his office on a previous occasion, and the consulate was asking different questions about what about the in Bangladesh. Bangla means Bengal. Bangladesh. And India. Bangladesh or East Bengal. So there was some military conflict there in this army. So he said, "You have been to Mayapur, you've seen the army." And he told him at that time, "Mr. Consulate, you should not be asking these questions." So later, when he was trying to get the visa, he told the consul, he said, "I'm very sorry, but I have to have this visa from Srila Prabhupada, spiritual." And then he said that, he said if you had given him $1 million today, he couldn't do what he did then. But because he was serving Srila Prabhupada, and impossible, we know Srila Prabhupada said, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. It was impossible for him to get that visa. But then he pressured the guy. He said, "I'm very sorry, you have to give me this visa. Otherwise, I'll have to report to the government of India about your asking questions about the army." And the guy became super angry. He slammed down the phone and hung up on him. At this time, Abhiram was in Delhi. So then he called him back and he said, "I'm coming on the next flight to Calcutta. I'll see you in the morning." And then, "All right," he hung up the phone again. And Abhiram took Srila Prabhupada's passport into the consul's office, and he told the secretary, "Yes, I'm here to see the consul." She says, "Don't go in. Don't go in. Give me." He said, "You don't want to see him right now, and he doesn't want to see you." The next, pressuring him and blackmailing him to get that visa, to get Prabhupada's visa. And they stamped the visa, and it came back out. And then she said to him, the secretary said to him, "You had better go now." Did you see that video? Sorry.
No.
Oh, it's on Dandavats.
The memories?
Yeah, it's on Dandavats, the clip. About 12, 13 minutes.
Okay.
So, wait, he was asking, how did he get the dude to start asking questions again? I missed that part, I misunderstood.
No, previously he'd been talking with the man, and the man was trying to pry some classified information from him.
From Abhiram?
Yeah.
So,
Abhiram used that as a leverage,
Yeah.
blackmail, to give him the visa for, so somehow or other, by hook or by crook, he was getting that visa for Prabhupada. Which Prabhupada, this was in 1977 in May. Prabhupada never did use that visa, though he wanted to come to America. He wanted to come to Gita Nagari and establish Maharashtra. And I remember hearing that Srila Prabhupada was going to come to Gita Nagari. The word had spread. And so my friends and I were prepared to get in the car and have some money for gas and drive to Gita Nagari to see Srila Prabhupada, which never happened. Although he did go to England at that time. And that was his last trip to the West in 1977. So that's a nice story that Abhiram tells. I recommend going on Dandavats.com and looking for that video clip of getting Prabhupada's visa. All right, so we'll stop here. I had a lot more, but that will have to be saved for another occasion. Any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
A couple of comments. So one is, I was listening to Prabhupada's class, and January 74, on this verse. And I was surprised that he spent the whole class talking about one of those items, which is deity worship. Because usually he talks about how association of devotees is 90% of Krishna consciousness. But it was it's an amazing class describing how to meditate on the deity. And it was very sweet. And it's like we hear, you start at the feet, and go up to the thighs, and then the waist, and the chest, and then the face. And it's very powerful, sweet class.
Interestingly enough, the Srimad Bhagavatam is also compared to the form of the Lord.
Yeah,
The first canto is his lotus feet,
right.
and you gradually go up, and in the 10th canto, called the Summum Bonum, or the highest good, is the Lord's smiling lotus face, and there you get the description of Krishna's Vrindavan Leela. So that analogy is given that the Bhagavatam is like the form of the Lord in meditating. So we gradually work our way from the lotus feet, the first canto, to the 10th canto, which is the smiling lotus face of the Lord. So go ahead.
And the second one is that I personally experienced the transformative power of Dhirodatta Swami's street Sankirtan. And one reason it was so powerful is because he brought Radha Damodar right out on the street. I don't know if I've shared this, but I'll never forget, Pittsburgh, 1972. It was a hot day on Forbes Avenue, and this kind of like the dog days of summer, like August. It wasn't Tucson, but it was humid in Pittsburgh. So anyway, it's one of those days where the businessmen are all cursing me out, and then this one guy, he just, all I had was back to Godhead. So I was a young brahmachari, and I said, have a back to Godhead. And he just spits right on my wrist, a big, mucus laden. And I just wanted to go like this to the guy. And I restrained myself, and then I went, oh, Krishna. I said something like, please save me. And we knew that Dhirodatta Swami and the bus was coming in, because it was the roadshow troupe at that point. So
And they did the performance at the Syria Mosque.
yes, so they came to rehearse in the basement of our temple. This nice shady side, quiet.
And Prabhupada came and saw that performance at the
He
Syria
did,
Mosque.
very much. So, but shortly after that, practically I just wanted to sit down and hang it up, All of a sudden I heard ching, 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 and the Radha bus just comes right up and parks right in back of me. It was like the 7th Cavalry, they just came to my rescue. And then Dhirodatta Swami and the brahmachari, it's like a squadron of saffron. They just leaped out of the bus, and within no time they set up this shrine right on the street. Right in a good spot with a little indentation, I think there was some greenery and fountain. And and Dhirodatta started doing the arrangements for Radha Damodar. And then the brahmacharis were boom, 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 And the whole thing, it was a little glimpse of Goloka right on the street. And the same people that had just been, dismissing me, they were like stunned, just like to say, and just caught up in the whole mood. But that he could do that, just by his bhakti, he could, Haribo, Haribo, the whole thing. And I'll never forget how he and the Radha Damodar bus saved me that day.
Nice tour.
Yeah, and also in San Diego too. 72, before you came. 73, early 73. He came with now this was 73. So it was before, it was a big, it was before he teamed up with
No.
Krishna. Yeah, so he just came with Dayal Chandra, the mechanic, and Narad Muni, and Sri Vallabha, just a few guys, And then, but he was ill. He was very ill. But still, he wanted to take us all out of the temple to Horton Plaza, you know, to the degree. And he just set up Dhirodatta, and as ill as he was, he just chanted all day. All day, practically. He took a break, and then we had a little prasad. And then he was with a harmonium, you know. And it was superhuman. I mean, just to see him rise above